In this video, we'll talk about web applications overview. If you're already familiar with IIS Web Server, Apache, Tomcat, these kind of applications, you can skip this particular video. But I just did this video for users who doesn't have any kind of knowledge on web applications and basic knowledge on IIS or anything. But this is a very high level session, which we'll not talk about very detailed, but just for understanding purpose. Before we talk about Azure App Services, someone should understand what are these web applications and everything. Let's say we see web applications. So what are these web applications? Now we see mainly like in everywhere today we call a web, like ICICI bank.com. So this is an application which can be accessible over the internet using any basically a browser application, being it your Chrome or could be Internet Explorer, or could be Edge, or it could be Firefox, or could be Safari, any kind of things. So initially we had like in websites. Websites are more of basically a static content, so which talks about information about the product or information about the company or the business. But application is something different. Web application. The web application is more of like the entire your business can be done, or business information can be brought, or basically transactions can be done using this applications. Now I have this web application which we are seeing, ICICI bank.com. So using this web application, I can access this web application from anywhere using a Chrome or using an IE, Edge or Firefox or anything. So by using this one, I can perform all my banking needs and everything. Similarly, if you see then www.amazon.in, now this is another kind of a web application. Now this web application is accessible over the any browser, and through which we can sell the products or buy the products, or we can do transactions. It's beyond information. We are able to do transactions. Okay, like this. Today, the most of the businesses are running on web applications. Web applications. Now, how does these web applications run? So we see heard about a Java, a .NET, Python, Angular, Node.js, React.js. There are some kind of these are all some kind of a development tools. Sorry, development tools. So using these development tools, people will develop the web applications. So some companies will choose Java, some companies will choose .NET, some companies will choose Python, some companies will choose Angular as the interface, React Node.js as the interface, React.js. Like it all depends on company to company and technology to technology. So they all basically use these kind of technologies. Now, once the developers develop this code, whatever this application, how this application will be accessible? Now we would see in applications like IIS on a Windows server, and we can see a Tomcat application on both, which can run on Windows and Linux operating system, and Apache, a web server, we call it as a Windows or Linux, which can run on Windows and Linux, and like in which we called as NGIX, which can run on Windows and or Linux operating system. Now we call these things as a web servers or application servers. So in a technical terminology, we call them as an web or an application servers. Application servers. So the developed application by the developers is being deployed into these web servers. So these applications are capable of delivering the web applications and various methods. Now Microsoft Windows operating system has a default an application called as an IIS application, which we can run a .NET based applications into the Windows Server. Similarly, if you have a Java applications, which we can deploy it onto the Tomcat and Apache and NGX on a Windows and Linux, like many things. So you need to have an application server in order to deploy or deliver your web application. So what we do is so we take one of the Windows server, could be or a Linux server. So I'm just taking an example of a Windows server, which is running in an IIS application, which is running an IIS application. So what will happen with this IIS application? So under this IIS application, we have an actual application which is deployed or delivered. Basically, we call it as an application in the form of sites or something. So under one IIS application, we can deploy multiple applications based on requirement to requirement. Similarly, if you have a Windows server, you can use, let's say if you're having a Java application, then you can install a Tomcat or an Apache, and instead of IIS application, then you can run Apache or Tomcat. Now, with the deploying these application into the IIS, it's not enough. So what we do need in order to access this application? So I need to have a public IP and a valid FKDN name. So we need an FKDN name with a public IP address associated with this Windows public IP address associated with this server. So what is the use of public IP address? This is an IP address of a server, which is an identity of this server on the internet. Now FKDN name is the identification of your business. I would say an identification of the application. Identification of the application. So this we see called as like as I said just now, we have a www.icsbank.com, like in www.amazon.in, www.microsoft.com. So for the users, we always provide an FKDN name. We say that, hey, use www.icsbank.com to interact with a web application which is running on this server having a public IP address which is configured on IIS server. But the users who are accessing this application are not aware of what is in the backend, what type of server, what application server is being used, on which server it is being hosted. Like all this information is not exposed and not known to the user. So we need to ensure that this IIS or some kind of things. Now what is here? You need a Windows server or a Linux operating system. Then inside that you need an IIS application. Then inside that you need to deploy your own application. Then this is accessible to the outside. Let's take a small example in our case. So I'm going to the Azure portal and deploy small virtual machine. I'm creating one virtual machine at the Windows Server 22 data center, the 4 CPUs and 16 GB RAM. I'm creating this virtual machine. So we have this VM created. So I'm going to the virtual machine. So I see a public IP address of this virtual machine. So I have this Windows Server having a public IP address. So I'm going to connect to this virtual machine using an RDP. Okay, let's install the IIS web server. It's taking some time. So I'm installing a web application. So web server. So this will install the IIS application. By default, it will not be installed along with the OS. So we need to explicitly install this. If you have an Apache or Tomcat, we have to download from the internet and install it. So we have this web server installed. So once web server is installed, tools, you see Internet Information Services Manager. Here, when we expand this, we will be able to see the sites. Under this, so we can have multiple applications created, and default, Microsoft will create one website called as a default website, which runs on a port number called as an 80, which is HTTP. Now, if you want to secure your web application using an SSL certificate, so you can deploy the SSL certificate and you can bind it, but just for the sake. Now, what I'm trying to do is, now I'm just creating it. I'm just stopping the default website. So I'll create my own website. For that, first I'll create a folder. So I'm creating a folder called as in some acute application. Now this is the folder where all my application files can be kept, which is developed by developers. So now when I go to the sites, I add a website. I'm just giving it called as app acute, a physical path where the application is exactly deployed or available. So I'm going for an acute application and runs on a port number 80. Right. I deployed this application, basically created an application in IIS website, but I don't have any content available in this one. So I'm opening a notepad. I'm saying welcome to an Azure Outsec and VM web server. Just I'm creating it. You can put up a small, consider that this is save as, and select all files. Select the location where you want to save it. I want to save in this folder, index.html. So you have to save that as an HTML or HTML files. So once you have that, so you can see index.html. Now I can go here and I can say called as a browse. So we can see it's giving me welcome to Azure web server. Now, how do I accessible from the outside? So I have the public IP. So I need to create a DNS record. So I'm going to a GoDaddy where my domain acutela.com. So we create a DNS record, add a new record. I'm saying a record. I'm saying an app1 value, the public IP of the virtual machine. I'm taking the public IP of the virtual machine and I'm just saving it. Now when I ping app1.acutela.com, still the record name resolution is not happening, but okay, it takes some time. Now we can see it is resolving to a public IP. Now when I say http://app1.acutela.com, we need to get a message called as a welcome to server. But now it will not come. The reason is we didn't open the port. So I'm going to the network settings. Maybe you can refer NSZ section in the other videos. So I'm adding an inbound port. I'm saying called as an HTTP service allow from anywhere. So I'm allowing because by default, all the ports on the Azure virtual machine are blocked. we don't get. Now I allowed port number 80. Now let's click on this one. Now we can see that welcome to Azure VM Web Server. So any web application will be associated with an FQDN and will map to a public IP address. And there is an application deployed on the server, okay, which is where a public IP is mapped to this server, either on any of these web application servers like an IIS, Tomcat, or an Apache, which is developed on any of these kind of platforms. This is simple how this web server, web applications are deployed. So generally, typically people will use developers, copy their code into the path which we created. So like I create a path here. So the developers will deploy their application, copy their application here, and from there they run it. Okay. Right. So that's the I would say called as an just overview about web. Someone who's not having a knowledge on web servers and everything, because this information is required for further videos like when we are doing an Azure App Services. Okay. For the sake of knowledge, I created this video.